On the 6th of July 1965, Blakehurst Baptist Church was officially founded. And now, 2015, we're celebrating half a century, 50th anniversary of the Blakehurst Baptist Church. And this is our story.
The church, when they first met, they met in Blakesley Road in the Senior Citizens Hall. And I can well remember being in the hall and Craig Skinner was preaching, and he preached from the kitchen over the top of the servery, which was the lectern, was the servery.
Craig Skinner was brought up at the Bexley Baptist Church. He was a couple of years older than me, and we were thrown out of the Bexley Baptist Church on one occasion for playing Pistol Pack and Mama on one of the pianos. He was involved in the building of the first church. It was built along lines that Craig had suggested, had white pews down the church, and for a number of years suited us very well.
We live across from the church, and when we built our home, it was just a vacant block of land except for the old cottage there, which had been Mr. Blake's cottage. When the church bought the property, the old cottage became the first manse. It was very cold, it was very damp, and I remember going over there one time and Betty Skinner said to me, "Just have a look behind the piano," and she pulled the piano out and there were snails crawling up the wall behind the piano.
John, at the time of calling, was the pastor of the Cronulla Church. He had an immediate impact, and we got an influx of members.
You could always be sure you'd get the gospel and you'd get it straight. I think he was a very good pastor. He would visit you if you weren't well, and he was good to talk to, and he had a great sense of humour, which I enjoyed.
A lot of the kids used to go to Teen Ranch, and when they came back of a Sunday, they'd all sit in the rows along the front, and we used to have them down, take it in turns for supper at the various houses.
Came to the church when I was very young, would have been in 1970 or 71, 72, somewhere there. It was full congregation in the old building on the old white pews. It was Sunday school out the back in a building that was standing on one lawner.
One of Craig's initiatives was to introduce all-age Bible school, and that grew, and eventually we had no spare room in the current building, and so it was decided to build a new auditorium.
The church, they were trying to decide whether or not to build a new building, the meeting hall, out toward the Blake's house or into number one. And they decided to go the other way, so that worked for us, because then they left number one up and it was available. So we applied for rent, and the church was very gracious to us and rented it to us for 9 years.
When we grew out of the school building and we built the present church, the cottage was pulled down and the beautiful stones were halved, and they now are at the front of the new church and the back of the church.
When I came home the first time, I think it was the first or the second time, I went off dutifully and got my hat, because I knew we always wore hats in church. And when I arrived in the church, I found that the only person who had a hat on was Mavis Edwards. And life had changed since we were away.
And I can remember the tugs of change back there. I can remember the church growing and seeing that growth right up to, everything was filled, every seat and seats brought in, then to a plateau, and then I can remember over a 2-year period, 20 young couples. They got married, we'd seen them grown up, and they moved out to places like Campbelltown. And so we lost all the middle youth of the church, and that was sad. But in the meantime, there was very active Sunday school, adult Sunday school as well. Friday night, the 7 years, a team, and Jim and I were heading that up, of junior club, and we started small and then we got up to 130, I think it was, and then went small again. John Farr held for, I think it was nearly 20 years, a ladies' Bible study in our home every Tuesday morning. I can remember it took us about 3 years to get through Hebrews.
My memories of Tommy Wardrobe, for example, who used to always stamp on my toe every time he came into church. Rachel Salon, coming down the aisle on a skateboard. Stella Nunes came in a wheelchair. And then we had Guy, and now we've got Joel. And so it's been a place of special people. I remember Pop Ray, who when he was 98 fell out of a bus, and was quite proud of the fact that he was then recorded in the Leader. No bones broken, he just bounced.
The church sent over a couple of recruiters to head on us in California and said, we want you to come back as associate pastor. And I wouldn't have accepted an offer from any other church, but because it was Blakehurst, we made the decision to return. John Farr was really good. I said, well, then where do you want me to invest my time? And he said, someplace where you can reach people outside the walls of the church. And on the way back from scripture classes, I'd walk past the outdoor basketball courts there at Blakehurst and saw one of the teachers struggling with coaching these guys in basketball. And so I asked if he needed any help, and he said, oh yeah, I'd love to have you come. So I started doing that. Nathan was school captain, Sherry became a prefect. They both had a pretty substantial influence in the school, and they tended to attract other kids who had then come along to church. So Greg McConnell, Stuart Edwards,
James Beavis.
James Beavis.
Our philosophy at that time, really, working with youth, having our kids at that age, was basically we had an open house. And particularly with the youth, we had the suppers after church, and at times there would be 40 kids packed in number 3. There were some really difficult, really kind of heartbreaking times that people were going through. And so it is that kind of, that journey where it's the joy, but it's also the sorrow that you share.
We've had some tragedies. We had one young lad, Peter Summer, who died in a car accident taking kids home from church on Sunday night. And young John Farr, that was a real blow to the fellowship. Our Alison and Stan Squire, who was a ex-president of the Baptist Union, and very sad.
At a family camp, Dave Richo said something really meaningful and powerful to me. We were sharing it at the time, and there was a couple of some dark things were going on in a couple of people's lives, and Richo just said, look, as a community, we celebrate everyone's highs and we mourn the lows, and we do it together. And that is something that I've really seen that over the last 20 odd years that I've been here.
It's great having the fellowship, and I can remember the first time we came home that everybody brought a present at the ladies' fellowship. I can get all weepy about that. And I remember, opening all these things and thinking, good heavens, all these people buying all this stuff, it was lovely.
I can remember years that were rather sad in comparison from what had gone, when we became a very elderly congregation, where Rod and Michelle came with their children, and yes, that was very, very encouraging, and they did bring some young families in.
I actually grew up at the church. I think we started to attend when I was about 5 years old, 1972 perhaps, and then grew up there as a child and then left for 12 months while we lived in the country. But then back as a teenager and then as a young adult, and met Gemma. We married in 1992, and then at the end of 1994 left to go to Bible college. We didn't think we'd be coming back other than to visit, but then in 2002, after Rod Benson left, the church called us and I became the senior pastor.
The craft was also a very energetic time in the life of the church, where we'd have up to about 40 young mums and their children, and then playtime was started. And that's been hugely successful.
Back in the 90s, the church ran Busy Bees for preschoolers and their parents, and in 2003 we changed that to a playtime, and gradually over the years we added to it. So we had started with Monday, had Tuesday, Wednesday, and then we added a mainly music about 7 years ago on a Friday. We've seen hundreds of people from our community come through that ministry. We've been able to work with people through happy situations and hard situations, going through difficult times, being able to support people, grow in friendships, and we've been able to share Jesus, pray for people, and still now I get phone calls from people asking for prayer when things are tough.
Well, I've been involved in children's ministry here on and off for 30 years. I got involved in the late 80s and was involved in Junior Club, which was a Friday night kids program. It was quite small at the time. And then in the early 90s it sort of changed shape and became more of a kids fit program right up until I left Blakehurst at the end of, when was it, 95? And then I got back involved in 2005. We've been involved in kids clubs, we've done holiday club, we've just done our 13th holiday club here at Blakehurst. We've been involved in school scripture, particularly at our local school, Connells Point, for many, many years. And we've also been running a kids mentoring program at Connells Point for the last 7 or 8 years.
I've also valued the youth work and the youth group when I was at that age. You know, we did a lot of really good things together. We played soccer together, we played a bit of cricket together, went on outings and did things, made some excellent friends that really affirmed my faith.
Well, when I first started coming to Blakehurst, I was already sort of past that age of youth group. I could see though from going there was a strong young adult group as well, and they were good times. And I got to see that the church was obviously very passionate about youth. A couple of years in, I got to get on the leadership team as well, and I was there for 11 years. Yeah, it was a really good experience for me, something that I really appreciated, working alongside some really inspirational people, Andrew Tuck and Steve Tuck and Dave J, James Beavis, Gareth, who's the people I've probably forgotten as well. Some real quality people. Well, maybe not Darren McDonald, a little bit rogue, sorry mate. Gavin is a bit on the dodgy side as well, but besides that, they really did a lot for my Christian life as well.
I've been coming here since the week after I was born. I really like youth group, and it's good to have like people your own age. It
looks like it's a really good youth emerging again. I have a feeling that this is going to be a time where another sort of golden era of Blakehurst youth. I really believe that these guys are probably going to look back on these times and with great fondness, because these will be good times.
The seniors ministry at the church has been going on for quite a long time. Audrey and Eric Mercer ran it to start with, and then Molly and Ron Riley. Jim and I took it over from Molly and Ron, and it's still a strong outreach and time of fellowship.
There are a number of student pastors and associate pastors who were part of the church over the years. In my time, there was Andy and Claire Ewell, there were Brett and Anne McLaughlin, and most recently, James and Sherry McMaster. And of course, James and Sherry came as an amalgamation of Blakehurst Baptist Church and St George Community Baptist Church, which was a great thing for both congregations as we amalgamated together and have gone forward in ministry.
Well, I'm thankful for the fellowship, and I'm thankful for the teaching, because you never stop learning.
Oh, it's the fellowship. It's the fellowship, especially when you're a widow.
Adventures like Richard Tuck and I going off to the Colossal Canyon
and getting lost.
We didn't get lost.
No, you were lost.
We weren't lost.
But I've also enjoyed growing up in this church. So I started here in my teens when I first became a Christian, being able to get married here, but also raising my own children here as well. So just the blessing of seeing kids growing up in the church and then becoming involved in ministry themselves.
The community, I have lots of friends here. and having good Christian friends helps you in your walk, helps you to continue the race and press on for Jesus, and having a community to help you do that and support you in that is most excellent.
I like singing songs and worshipping God, like with music.
Music's always been awesome. I think the preaching of and the analysis of the Bible has been excellent.
It's like my family. I love that I can come here with my immediate family, with my husband Dave and my girls. They and I have been challenged here, and I love the opportunities that it's given for all of us to minister to people and learn to use our gifts.
This is the place where I got to discover the greatest treasure I have in my life, and so there were people who shared the gospel with me, and there's nothing more valuable to me in this life and the next than that, and so I'm literally eternally grateful for this place.
I guess it's absolutely impossible to encompass 50 years of ministry at Blakehurst in just a little over 15 minutes. There have been so many other stories and people, other events and incidences, other programs and ministries that have gone on over many years and over decades, which God has used to touch lives, to transform people, to grow, to impact the community and the country and the world. It's been an absolute pleasure and privilege to be involved in this church over actually 35 of those 50 years, and the last 13 almost as senior pastor. And great to work with keen, enthusiastic, faithful followers of Jesus who want to follow the vision that we have established under God, that we are Blakehurst Baptist Church, sharing the love of Jesus through actions and words so that lives are transformed and that God is glorified.